What's going on, little mamas? Before we watch the episode, I got some stuff I want to talk about. One, we're starting a Patreon. It's called the Comrade tier. It's $2 a month, and you get the following benefits. Collective is seeking to expand, and in order to do what we want to do, such as film our second documentary this summer, we need funds. Everything that Collective does comes out of our own pockets. The only other time we asked for anything was when we did our original documentary, and of course, receipts will always be provided. If you ever wanted to contribute more than just $2, we also have a Cash App. Of course, it's your money, your life is your priority, but anything helps. The second thing I want to talk about is don't forget to subscribe to our Collective Live channel. We're moving our live content over to Collective Live, and our new podcasts only stay on KollectivTv for a week. So please go ahead and subscribe there if you want to watch those. But also, if you just want to watch some highlights for each podcast episode are now coming out. And speaking of the Collective expansion, we're also doing something called Collective Gaming on a secret third channel. It's not a secret. And we're doing this because we want to provide something fun, especially with things looking as bleak as they are right now in the States. Sometimes you guys might just want to watch communists play games. And I'm a communist, and I want to play video games. Anyway, hope you enjoy the show where we talk with, who's we? Anyway, I hope you enjoy the show where I speak to our comrade out in the Baltics. I think it's a really good one, and I'll catch you later. Hello, my communist lovelies in the States and internationally around the world. It is Ivan De La Rosa once again with a surprise, another pre-recorded episode instead of our usual Friday live where anything and everything can happen. I hope you guys don't mind. It's just sort of the way my schedule's been working out, sort of the way our schedule worked out with our guest here, who goes by Iskalat. Otherwise, I'm referring to them as the Baltic communist. We'll get into that in a second. So it's been a pretty crazy decade this past week when this airs. Essentially what has happened, we mentioned it a little bit on the podcast before last. Donald Trump has ascended into the presidency of the United States, and we know for a fact as communists that we say a lot that the Democrats and the Republicans are the same, and they are, because they both back finance capital. They both believe in liberalism. They both uphold a white supremacist nation, the greatest empire in the world. And by greatest, I mean the most lethal, the most deadly, the most merciless. And now it's the Republicans' turn to hold the presidency. And essentially what has happened is the Democrats are backing away from all their virtue signaling and allowing this party and these people to essentially try to speed run the U.S. into capital F fascism, even though people like myself included would say that the United States has always been fascistic, has always been fascist. But now we're essentially seeing the contradictions in the United States really starting to reach a boiling point where I really can't say what's going to happen. I mean, dialectically, we can look at things, we can make our predictions and our assertions, but so far, every day has been an increasingly crazier nightmare. Right now in the States, I would say probably the latest of the horrifying news is deportations have skyrocketed. At least the tenacity in which the deportations are occurring. ICE, the Immigration Customs and Enforcement Police, have essentially and effectively been seen everywhere in the United States. They are arresting United States citizens. They are stopping people for how they look, their colors, their accents, people who look like me, people of my own nationality. It's just kind of for a lot of people, even I would say seasoned communists, just becoming a lot more overtly scary. And then the latest news is that Donald Trump signed an executive order to build a facility that can house 30,000 migrants in a detention center in Guantanamo Bay. And the symbolism is not lost on why Guantanamo Bay would be the place to do something like that. But but I digress. So I have my friend here, Iskalat, who hails from the Baltics, a region in the world where it, believe it or not, is even more difficult to organize. It seems like, at least based off our conversation before we hit record, as a communist than it is the United States. Right now in the United States, it is essentially illegal to run as a communist in a political party. You can run as a socialist. You can say you're a communist on the street without legal repercussion a lot of the time. Even though there is an extensive history of communists, such as Fred Hampton and Huey P. Newton being chased and killed and destroyed by the forces of the state. But I digress. So you heard me ask a lot. That's kind of like the snapshot of what's been going on here in the United States in the last couple of days. And obviously, what happens in the empire affects the other places in the world. So, does anything I just said, kind of ring any bells for you in the experience that is happening within the Baltics as a communist?
Yes, unfortunately, a lot of these events that you listed, they are happening right now in the Baltics as well, and they have been happening for a pretty long time, including all these profilings that you mentioned, the ethnic animosity that is being deliberately incited by the government, the ferocity, the violence against people who come from other countries, especially from the Arab-speaking countries, from Africa. Because if you read European news, that you will then you will find a lot of information about the so-called migrant crisis, as the capitalist media referred to it. But this crisis was caused exactly by the very same imperialist powers and their lackeys. So first they destroy, exploit, and loot all of these countries that are located in West Asia, in Africa, in Latin America, and then they pretend to wonder where all these refugees, these migrants come from. And this animosity is actually universal right now for the for the capitalist imperialist world, because right now they need to divide the workers along these ethnic, national, race lines in order to maintain control. And if you read news stories from the United States, from Canada, from Europe, from Russia, then you will notice the same trend, the trend of hatred against the migrants. It's increasing everywhere in unison. Of course, capitalism is not some sort of monolith. It is not a hive mind, but they all understand that they're in a very precarious situation, that the communist movement, the labor movement worldwide is gaining a lot of traction, it is gaining a lot of attention. And even though it is not as organized as we would have hoped, it is still doing really, really well. So it is growing. And even here in the stronghold of reaction, you can see the interest towards the Soviet history, towards all the progress that was achieved with together with the Soviet Union, the true history of the region, that people already instinctively try to reject this reactionary framing of history and modern politics. And as for the migrants, unfortunately, there were a lot of instances where the Baltic and Polish border patrols would savagely beat and murder people at the border, and then they would use that as a pretext to install a state of emergency in these border regions, because the state of emergency allows them to effectively ban demonstrations, to ban protests, to ban
Yep.
all kind of printed or spoken expression of our opinions. And it also allows them to militarize, use that as another pretext for rapid militarization, for the rapid construction of a reactionary police state, that they can use the same experience that they gained killing migrants in order to disperse demonstrations elsewhere. And despite the fact that they badmouth the migrants, the refugees so much, they're exploiting that. They're exploiting these people. They're bleeding them dry, because the Baltics and Poland as well Right now, they have an ever-growing number of migrant workers because the local population is rapidly aging. We have a very serious brain drain problem that was triggered by imperialism after they destroyed the Soviet Union. And because of that, there is no one left to do the utmost important jobs of maintaining infrastructure, of construction, of various services. So they attract a lot of people from places like Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, other Central Asian countries, African countries, and then they treat these people like dirt. They pay them a lot less compared to the locals. They use all of these repressive ethnicity and language laws to repress these people, to make it very difficult to learn the language, to make it very difficult to converse with the locals. And when the migrant workers, overburdened as they are, cannot learn the language in time, they're slapped with various sanctions, they're fired, they're deported, they're fined. We have this ridiculous language police system that I will touch upon later. So they're trying to maintain control by both trying to increase their surplus value by exploiting these people mercilessly, but at the same time, they're trying to maintain political control by pitting different nationalities against each other. So they're spreading
Yeah.
these fear mongering propaganda techniques, grooming gangs, robbers on the loose, migrant murders, or something like that.
You're
We have
essentially
seen,
describing
yeah.
the exact situation. Yeah. And for new communists and new comrades, new people to the podcast, the reason why this situation that Iskala is describing is essentially a one for what's happening in the United States, is because this is what happens when imperialism is reaching its peak contradictions, when it's reaching its boiling point, so to say, where basically in order for capitalists to maintain their wealth, for the empire to maintain its wealth, it needs to plunder. That's kind of the whole point of it, right? So the United States mainly has plundered Central and South America. In the cases of like Europe, with England, France, the Baltics, Germany, they plunder, West Asia, the Middle East, or Africa. So when the United States goes into, or Europe, when they go into these countries, either with blatant military force, with corporations backed by militia, backed by mercenaries, or just economic warfare, you get a situation where now the wealth of those nations is being put into the hands of the empire, and the people from those nations now have to follow their wealth to the empire in order to even get a macodium of a life of subsistence. In many cases, a lot of people have to literally travel to use their own resources that is being plundered from their own countries. So, like Escalante is saying, that we're basically, as these contradictions get worse, and like life for the average worker is not getting any better, the capitalists and the state will use things like race relations in order to basically divide the working class, and that's what's happening in the States as well. So you mentioned like the like the Polish border police, or like whenever there's this so-called migrant crisis, how they're basically militarizing these borders and declaring state of emergencies. It's the same thing in the States. So in like New Mexico, Arizona, California, well, not, I don't think California, Texas, those places are have been labeled as in state of emergencies, where then the U.S. military, the Marines, the Army can come down and set up, and basically, yeah, essentially, they haven't yet used the military to ban things like protest or assembly, but I mean that is rapidly approaching. Um, so that's why these situations are so similar. I mean, you're practically describing the United States.
So I was talking about the migrant situation, and it was in the making for the last 10 to 15 years, ever since the start of the so-called Arab Spring, and most of them
Hmm.
were imperially sponsored coups in order to destroy sovereign countries in North Africa and West Asia. The most tragic example being Libya, and the most recent victim of imperialist aggression, Syria, in order to destabilize this potential united front against imperialism that could, for example, help the Palestinian struggle. And they're also using that to produce a huge influx of potential migrant workers. And they're using that situation to pit different countries and different ethnicities and different peoples against one another. And it started in the Mediterranean, where these Greek, Italian, and Spanish border patrols would sink migrant boats and would prevent entry. And this continued and expanded, and this also rapidly picked up pace in Eastern Europe because it is also a major transit hub. So Belarus, the Baltics, because it's one of the shortest paths if you're traveling from Central Asia, from Afghanistan, because it is too dangerous to travel by sea. So many people travel on foot. They traverse these vast distances, and they're using the Baltics as this sort of transit hub. So they just need to enter the so-called Schengen area before they can go to much wealthier states like Germany, Sweden, Ireland, Austria, etc. And now, essentially, these Eastern European regimes, the sanitary buffer that was erected by EU and US imperialism. Basically, we are told to act as this sort of fascist policeman. So we're constantly injuring and murdering all of these migrants at the border. If you read the news, if you read Doctors Without Borders and Amnesty International reports, then you will see these photos and video recordings of people with their ribs broken, with their limbs broken, coughing up blood, or, for example, simply freezing to death. So all of these border troops in the Baltics and Poland, they refuse medical treatment. And if it's winter time, then they simply leave people to freeze to death. And a lot of these migrants, they don't have warm clothing. They have summer clothing, and they don't have adequate supplies. And the Belarusian border guards who rescued these migrants. So what the Baltic and Polish nationalists do, they simply beat these people up, they rob them, they take away all of the money, their telephones, so there would be no evidence. They take away the passports, any and all documents, and other vital belongings, such as warm clothing, and then they simply dump people on the other side of the border. And the Belarusian border guards pick them up, and they record all of these instances of brutal beatings, torture using stun batons, and cattle prods, and just vicious beatings. And a lot of these people,
Yeah.
unfortunately, succumb to the injuries. And they record and publish this extensively. And for the last, during the last 10 years, hundreds of migrants were killed or severely beaten to the point of becoming disabled.
Yeah, yeah, it's the same thing here with the United States so-called migrant crisis. There's a famous picture. I'll throw it up when this video is edited, of a border patrol police on a horse whipping a Haitian asylum seeker, and it's just real
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I've seen this one. Yeah.
barbarism. It's just real barbarism, but this stuff like this happens all the time. Um, there was a scene that quite made me emotional because these particular refugees were from my own country, where a bunch of men were trying to get into the country via a box truck, and something happened to the truck, and essentially these men essentially broiled to death in the back of this truck. And like, the police, the Americans, they either blatantly ignore the cries to help for these people, or brutalize them. There was another scene where I believe it was a woman and her baby drowned in a river, where border police on the American side could have helped her, but they just didn't.
Yes, unfortunately, it is true here. So the border guards, even if they can help and they're required to help any refugees that are seeking safety, they're just leaving them to die. They know that it's, for example, it's freezing temperatures outside, and they still leave them to die. So they viciously beat them.
Yep.
They interrogate them. They use all of these brutal tactics. And since there's this state of emergency, basically they are unaccountable. and then they
Mhm.
simply dump these people on the other side of the border. And this is very characteristic of the entire reactionary apartheid nationalist system that exists in the Baltics. So a little bit of historical background. As many people know, the Baltic republics were part of the Soviet Union. And in short, there was a very vicious civil war from 1917 to 1919. And like in Finland, the reactionary forces sadly won because they were backed by the German Empire, by the British Empire, by France, the United States, a lot of these imperialist powers. And they installed loyal nationalist regimes in the Baltics that were closely aligned to fascism. And eventually, they all experienced fascist coups, and they simply became fascist tyrannies. So all labor unions were banned, all progressive political parties were banned, and the communists, ever since 1920, they had to work underground. The situation came to a head in 1939 and 1940 when World War II started. The Baltic economies that were basically a source of cheap raw materials, these economies collapsed, and the labor union gained a lot of strength internally. And in 1940, the general strike started, which completely paralyzed the fascist governments. And then they were forced to resign. And the Soviet Union signed protection treaties with the Baltics in order to station troops and prevent Nazi takeover. Because earlier the nationalist government signed non-aggression and friendship pacts with Nazi Germany. So at the same time, the Nazis steamrolled over the Low Countries and France. And in order to seek protection, the Baltic republics applied for Soviet membership and became constituent republics. During World War II, there was a lot of gruesome fighting in the north because we were close to Leningrad, and the Nazis used the Baltics as this ramp, as a strategic point to attack Leningrad from the south. And since the Baltic Soviet republics were very young, a lot of nationalist elements remained, and they formed the backbone of all these massive collaborationist organizations that participated in ethnic cleansing, in the Holocaust. The Baltics had a very large and vibrant Jewish community, and more than 370,000 Jews were brutally slaughtered in the Baltics with the help of these collaborator thugs. And after the Nazis were pushed back, these collaborators, they organized these underground groups that are erroneously referred to as the Forest Brothers. And these nationalist groups ravaged the countryside for almost 10 years after the war ended because the Nazis left large caches of weapons and ammunition. A lot of these nationalist ringleaders, they were trained by the Abwehr, the Nazi military intelligence. And then these groups were recruited again by the Western intelligence services, by the CIA and the MI6, in order to conduct raids and sabotage against the Soviet governance. But eventually, these groups were subdued and defeated. And for some time, the Baltic republics, the Baltic countries, they prospered because again, like I said, the Baltics, it is a vital transit hub. And we've had a history of very strong industrial development and trade. And the Soviet Union used that opportunity to transform the Baltics into this high-tech hub. So we had very advanced machine building, ship building, automobile industry, and also we had CPU fabs. So we manufactured computers for space exploration, for mainframes, for personal computers. We had a very strong pharmaceutical industry that exported drugs to places like Western Europe, North America, and Japan to help the victims of nuclear bombardment. And the Baltic republics, they were basically the most well-off parts of the USSR. But after the murder of Joseph Stalin, a lot of these petty bourgeois and capitalist elements took hold with Khrushchev and his allies. And eventually, there were many Trotskyists and outright nationalist groups within the Communist Party that tried to sabotage it from within in the 1960s, the so-called National Communists. But thankfully, they were defeated. But in the 1980s, all of these local capitalist elements conspired with the fascist elements that escaped the country through these red lines, through Nazi Germany in 1944 and 45, the so-called diaspora. They conspired together and they organized a lot of these cultural trips in order to spread nationalist influence. And because the communist ideology was not enforced anymore in the Soviet Union, basically, it was easy for them to spread their influence, to accuse the Soviet government of repressing them, and basically mask their intentions as the fight for freedom in the late 1980s, early 1990s. This culminated in 1990 when the Baltic nationalists unilaterally redeclared the creation of these capitalist republics. And basically, the Soviet government and the capitalist government, they were in a deadlock. And when the GKCHP happened in the August of 1991, the nationalists feared they might lose. But the elements from other Soviet republics, the capitalists from Kazakhstan, Ukraine, Belarus, Russia, Yeltsin, Gorbachev, Shushkevich, they basically conspired with the Baltic separatists that they would agree for the Baltics to secede in order to set a precedent and basically justify the illegal dissolution of the Soviet Union. So the Baltics were the first to illegally secede. And with this provocation, other capitalist elements followed suit. So it is important to understand you cannot solely blame this on some foreign spies or solely on Gorbachev. This was a very sophisticated campaign of sabotage and terror and psychological warfare waged by capitalism. And when capitalism was restored in 1991, it immediately became a very harsh campaign of repression against the the remains of the Soviet government and the Communist Party. So the Communist Party was immediately banned and all of its assets seized. And the governments in Latvia and Estonia, they went through the harshest route. They basically implemented a system of apartheid. Yes, that is correct. We have an apartheid system in the Baltics that was inspired by the South African and Israeli apartheid.
What I was saying was, I really like how you added a lot of nuance to the dissolution of the Soviet Union, because a lot of young communists, I find, they kind of oversimplify it, and they'll say, it was just Gorbachev, it was just Khrushchev, it was just revisionism, without really understanding how much of a systematic and coordinated attack it really was on the culture, on the ideology, and on communism, on the Soviet Union as a whole. The other thing I was going to say was, one of the things that sticks out to me when I learned about perestroika, or the liberalization of the Soviet Union, the dissolution of the Soviet Union, is the night and day difference between the quality of life in the Soviet Union and the former Soviet, which I'm sure you'll get into in a second. One of the things that always sticks out to me is the sheer amount of people that actually ended up homeless essentially overnight, because so many people lived in these, state-owned, state-run apartments, housing blocks, and whatever. A lot of people in liberals, they give that such a bad name, when really, what is the difference between the state owning a place for you to live versus you not having a place to live at all? So I think it's something along the lines of, I don't know why I want to say 400,000, but I also want to say 4 million. I have to look it up. I have it in the book over here. People essentially went homeless overnight, and that is something that is so demonstrable of how vile capitalists are, that people over in Wall Street, 22-year-olds, 23-year-olds, were essentially purchasing swaths of land and state-owned assets that no longer were state-owned because the Soviet Union didn't exist. So I'm sure you'll get into that a little bit as you discuss this apartheid system that exists now in the Baltics.
Yes, the losses sustained by the Soviet land are immense. They're truly immense. If we're talking about demographic losses alone, it is at the very least 40 million people. So these are direct losses. So from the hypermortality that was installed by capitalism through poor healthcare, unavailability of decent housing, employment opportunities, or simply a worry-free life that you don't have to worry that you're going to lose your job overnight, or for example that you're going to get kicked out of your house, or for example another military conflict will flare up, or the capitalist governments will enable some sort of repressive policy. So these are direct losses, and they're absolutely enormous for places like Ukraine, the Baltic region, and for example, some places in Russia, many places like in the northeast, in the borderlands like Pskov, etc. And the combined losses, if you also include the people that were not born in the first place because of plummeting birth rates, our birth rates completely collapsed because of this
Right.
predatory capitalist system, because people are so worried, they're so wary, they're so poor that having kids right now is considered basically a luxury. And if you combine these losses, and you also combine losses that were caused by the Khrushchev's campaign. So the Soviet Union basically uh, dialed back the campaign of advancing state sector and the policy of lowering grocery prices, because the Soviet Union after the war it quickly repealed the stamp system in 1947, and every few years the government actually lowered the prices on most groceries like grain, sugar, bread, etc. And you can actually find these bulletins that were published in the late 1940s and early 50s, and you can see that this policy showed the core principle of the socialist economy: to fulfill the needs of the people, to increase productivity, and this leads to lower prices. And you can see in capitalism, it's the other way around. Our Russian comrades that we are in close contact with, they say that capitalism, in essence, is the policy of extremely high and ever rising prices. You can see how the prices doubled in the last 4 to 5 years, and they're still going up and up and up. And going back to the demographic losses, so you have these very unpopular and very destructive market reforms that were introduced in the 50s and 60s that severely curtailed the growth of the Soviet economy. And also all of these laws in the civic sector, for example, the overly extreme promotion of abortions, for example. This was also wrong, because the Soviet Union had all the resources to provide childcare, to provide child facilities, and this increased rapidly with alcoholism, for example. Alcohol consumption was going out of control. So
Mhm.
there was hardly any ideological training, ideological hardening of the people, and they were susceptible to this capitalist propaganda that you must live a hedonistic lifestyle, that you must consume as much as you can get, that, for example,
Mhm.
getting these Western luxury goods was the goal of your life. So this went unattended. This
Yeah.
kind of mentality was spread by the capitalist elements within the country, outside the country, and effectively, there's a saying that in the 1990s, people were ready to sell their own mother for a pair of jeans and a can of Coca-Cola.
Yeah. I wanted to add because I decided to look it up because I wanted to be sure when I mentioned that figure about homelessness. So this statistic comes from Michael Parenti's Black Shirts and the Reds. So on page 108, he's talking about the end of subsidized rent in just Moscow alone. So the paragraph reads: with the end of subsidized rents, estimates of homelessness in Moscow alone run as high as 300,000. The loss of resident permits deprives the homeless of Medicare and other state benefits, such as they are. Dressed in rags and victimized by both mobsters and government militia, thousands of indigents die of cold, hunger on the streets of various cities. In Romania, thousands of homeless children live in sewers and train stations, sniffing glue to numb their hunger, begging and falling prey to various predators. So Yeah, no, exactly. Like as soon as the state apparatus, the communist model, um, this desire and need, these human need to simply just provide for people is destroyed by, like you were saying, hedonistic and capitalist forces. You essentially just spawn a living hell. Um, and when it comes to what you mentioned about alcoholism, that's one of the things that so here in the states, we have a massive opioid problem. People overdosing on
Yes.
fentanyl, people abusing oxycodone, morphine, heroin, and all this stuff. And the reason why is because people often turn to these drugs either A, because they need medications and can't get medications, or B, because there is such a pervasive hopelessness in society. Even some of the most staunch proletariat who, I'm sorry, even some of the proletariat that is most staunchly in support of capitalism doesn't see that the reason why they partake in certain of these activities is because they don't have anything really to look forward to. Um Shoot, what was I going to say as well? I slipped my mind, but go on.
Yeah, and the combined demographic losses, they exceed 70 million. So if you check the Soviet census data and the predictions for the years 2000, 2010, I think the latest is 2015. It was predicted that the Soviet Union would have a population of over 370 million people. So, for example, the Baltics would have a combined population of over 10 million, which is actually would be a lot. And right now, our combined population is less than 5 million. So you can see the catastrophic effect of the capitalist restoration and in its destructive force. And it can be compared to the Hitlerite invasion. What happened? So not only the hypermortality, but also the rapid brain drain and the emigration. The economies were purposely destroyed by the so-called shock therapy policy in order to force a lot of qualified Soviet men and women to emigrate along with their families in search of better work prospects. But many of those people, they had to do some really, really menial tasks. And the same thing happened here. In the Baltics, we had a very large concentration of high tech and heavy industry, and all of this was destroyed virtually overnight. And as a result, the Baltics lost millions of people, both in direct losses through hypermortality, as well as skyrocketing immigration. For example, Lithuania in the last 30 years had lost more than 1 million people, approximately 1.2 million. Latvia lost approximately 800, 900,000 people. These are only the official figures. And Estonia lost approximately 3 to 400,000. So you can see that this is absolutely catastrophic. And if this continues, we can really ask the question whether or not the Baltics will survive until the end of the century. Because really, it is the question of whether it's socialism or it's barbarism. Because if this continues, then smaller peoples like the Baltics, there's a real possibility of us simply going extinct, of going out forever because of imperialist cannibalism that is waged upon us.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of the general question that we're seeing all over, I would say all over the planet right now. I would say right now more distinctly, I think one of the biggest differences between what we're trying to achieve now as communists organizing in 2025 as opposed to 1950, 1930 is, at least the way I see it, the revolutionaries of old were fighting obviously for their liberation, for a better society, better world, better country, all that good stuff that we stand for, right? But now we're at a particular moment, particularly with climate disaster, that we're not only talking about just the liberation of, dismantling the United States empire and, allowing those who live within that empire to build their own communist states, or to liberate Europe, to liberate the countries that are under imperialism. Now we're talking about the future of the human species. So it's not only just a question of the extinction of those in the Baltics. I would say it's also a question of just humans in general, because we're clearly seeing the contradictions of the empires getting to such a point now where it's like you just said, it's socialism or it's barbarism. It's extinction of humanity or prosperity of humanity. And I think even staunch communists need to start to understand that a little bit more.
Yes, I agree with you. Of course, I would not sound so pessimistic because you can see the enormous progress that is going on in places like China, Vietnam, Laos, People's Korea, and the immense strength of communist and liberation movements around the world. So,
Mhm.
in places like Russia, Russia is just ripe for a revolution right now, because the support for socialism is so overwhelming that even the capitalist government there is forced to make concessions. It is forced to tiptoe around the issue, trying not to anger the people too much. And in places like India, where basically it is in a state of this civil war, I might say, with all these communist movements that are active in southern states, or, for example, the Naxalite campaigns and insurgencies that are happening in the north against the nationalist death squads, against all of these fascist elements from Delhi. For example, describe the progress that is going on in Africa right now. The Communist Party of Kenya, the
Mhm.
communists of South Africa and
Mhm.
Swaziland, or Eswatini, as it's
Mhm.
called right now, the immense progress in the Sahel area, so the Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali, and the strength of popular movements in South America. As difficult as it
Yeah.
might sound, with punks like Millet, uh, we're really sure that he will be the last of his kind.
Yeah, and
And
I don't mean to come off as yeah, I don't mean to be pessimistic. I'm trying to just sort of express the importance of continuing the struggle. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted you to come on and talk on the podcast, because I think a lot of American well, I shouldn't say American communists, because that makes us sound like the ACP, and we're not those people. Those are some real white supremacist motherfuckers. But I mean, like, communists who live in America, I should say, um, who are under the boot of the empire, need to see that other communists around the world are doing the work and are organizing, even in situations where it can be really peril, like have as you've described to me. And that was one of the benefits I think that happened when the United States tried to when they banned TikTok for 12 hours and everybody went to the Chinese version of TikTok and they started talking to Chinese people about communism, and people were they were finally exposed to the fact that, yeah, those communists over there in China, they're just people like you and I.
yes, and the thing is that even if some people are skeptical, we just have to be patient, because communism is doing really well in the world right now, and that is why the imperialists are unpacking the big guns. They're trying to
Right.
stem the movement in every way possible, and you can see the panic in their eyes, the stream of these fascist executive orders, the repression that is ramping up in Europe, that they're trying to contain the situation in the occupied South Korea, in Japan, and everywhere, in any place they have a foothold in. And you can see that we just have to keep the pressure on, because sooner or later, and I'm inclined to think rather sooner, we will be able to break the barrier and really start dismantling imperialism. The communist movement just needs to sort out some structural problems, some problems with organization to adapt to the modern age. Because right now, the people, yeah, you can say that they're atomized, but they're atomized in such a way that they're creating this kind of wall, because back in the day, you had these smaller and hyper organized groups of revolutionaries, but right now, with the spread of information, with the spread of literature, with the spread of mass action, the people might seem less consolidated, But the thing is that this vanguard party, it is the party in the broadest sense of the word, that it unites the whole people. That you have tens of millions, hundreds of people, hundreds of millions of people in the movement, and without them realizing it at this stage, but they will come to it, and they will join this force, because this is what humanity has to do. This is what humanity is required to do, and uh, this is what humanity basically will achieve, because this is our goal: to grow, to destroy these shackles of inequality and private property, to
Mhm,
explore the
mhm.
space, to uncover the mysteries of the universe. This
Yep.
is what this
That's
is the
why we
goal
have
of
the space
humanity.
background. Yeah.
Yeah, that's basically that's why we exist. And
Mhm.
you know, our Russian comrades, they say a very good thing, because that's how universe works, and very likely that's what universe actually intended to do, to create a force, humanity, that can reach
Experience the world.
this
Mhm.
can reach the stars at this high level of development, and
Yeah.
overcoming capitalism, destroying, again, like you said, it is the question of our survival, because it is simply that we have to do. There's just no question about it. Of course,
Yeah.
there are a lot of questions on how, when, uh, how to do it, but we just have to sweep capitalism out of the way.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's simply just blocking our path as humanity to success, to our greatest potential. I mean, literally that's exactly what Karl Marx was talking about, in not so many words, but essentially being like, we have all this technology, in the late 1800s. Why are we living this way? Why are there slaves? I don't understand. Like, we have electricity. That's crazy. Now we have the internet and space travel, and we're still living the same way we were, 200 years ago, but now it's in many ways a lot worse. I do find it interesting. You said something, and I kind of want to hear your elaboration on, if that's okay. Um, you mentioned that Russia is ripe for revolution, and that the government has to make concessions to the Communist Party in Russia. Now, I've heard American communists basically say that that party, that Communist Party in Russia, is um, essentially defunct, and is basically not an offshoot, but like a basically a puppet of the bourgeois government there. What do you have to say about that?
Of course, I was not talking about Zyuganov and his party. It is very clear who they are, that they do not represent the movement, obviously. Of course, there are people, good people in this party, but in these provincial organizations, people that at the moment do not know everything about Zyuganov and what he's doing. But overall, I was talking about the overall communist movement in Russia. It is very strong, because basically they have these organizations, these independent trade unions, and these communist study halls basically in every major city. They have these
Mhm.
advanced schools of thought that they're trying to reinvent the great Russian literature that existed during the times of Pushkin, during the Soviet times. And largely they're succeeding right now. Like I said, in many places they're not as organized as one would hope, but that problem will definitely be solved. And if you check the census data, all of these inquiries and polls, you will see that right now, even the young people, so the Gen X and younger, they're overwhelmingly for socialism. So more than 50% of
Mm.
young people. And this percentage is steadily rising among the older people, among the younger people. And regardless of their occupation or what they're doing, they're saying that socialism is the only way forward. And even if you check out all of these military channels that are reporting on what is going on in Ukraine, well, I have to be very careful with definitions, because I live in a very repressive state, in the Baltic state. You can see that those soldiers with hammer and sickle flags, with the Soviet flags, with all these Soviet insignias, with the victory banner, and all of these soldiers. It just shows that the society is really ready for it, because the capitalist government knows that. It tries to co-opt it, tries to tame it, tries to tiptoe around it, but you can see that this overwhelming desire for socialism, and even right now Putin has to use this socialist lingo in order to get his point across. Like, for example, when he's talking about American imperialism, the EU imperialism, it is certainly the case. They do exist. And the fact that he has to use this terminology, that he has to use all of this communist symbolism and communist meanings that he himself was deriding just 20 years ago. It shows you the immense power of the communist movement. And me and our comrades, we are certain that things will turn out all right. And like Joseph Stalin said, you need to increase the cultural level of the people, and everything else will set into place.
Yeah, no, for sure. I don't know. I'm just happy. I appreciate your how much optimism you have, because I think people in the States really need to hear what you're saying right now. Hear that in other places in the world, um, people are still doing what they have to do in order to bring about um, a prosperous future. For everybody, for humanity. Under the banner of communism, under the banner of socialism. Um, I guess kind of a particular question, right? So, as the United States is like facing this particular, let's say, burst of energy towards much more overt fascism, you, as someone who has to operate in the way that you do, would you have any, I guess, advice or encouragement for communists who happen to live within the imperial core within the United States?
Yeah, the utmost importance is do not be afraid. What they're trying to do is they're trying to scare you. They're just trying to distract you and beat you over the head with this repressive legislation so that you would be too distracted to organize, too distracted to fight. But they're doing this out of weakness, because they're weak, and because they have no other way out. So, like the French Revolutionary said, the revolution needs three things: bravery, bravery, and even more bravery. Uh, you just do not have to be afraid. Like Comrade Mao said, imperialism is a paper tiger. Of course, they will try to inflict torment on people. They will try to subjugate. They will try to kill people. But it is very important to not to be scared, because that's their whole point: to make you scared, to make you too disorganized, to make you too atomized to fight back. You just never must be afraid of them. Of course, you can experience some fear, because it is natural. People can experience fear, but you do not need to panic. You just need to keep doing what you're doing. You need to expunge all of these right wing elements that might be, for example, the likes of Bernie Sanders, that likes to repeat the same nonsense about building a better America. But when push comes to shove, he always votes for imperialist legislation. He votes for Trump's cabinet picks. So you do not let these con artists fool you with these false promises. You just need to follow your own path. That's what I can tell you. You just go. You don't have to. You don't have to be afraid. You just follow this revolutionary road, and things will improve. Things will get better.
Yeah, I think that's really wonderfully said. Huey P. Newton, he when he talks about revolutionary suicide versus reactionary suicide, some people, they read that text very literally, but at least the way I've interpreted it is that Huey is not only just talking about, the literal circumstance of, suicide, but to understand that your life under capitalism is forfeit one way or another. You're either going to die basically broken and old, or the police will kill you, or you'll die in some imperialistic war, or you'll die in, some shitty care facility that's underfunded, or you can stand up for what is rightfully yours as a human being, the entitlement to your labor, to clean drinking water, to shelter, to food. What are you afraid of if ultimately the result is going to be the same? Either you can fight for what's right and your life may be forfeit, but your life is forfeit anyway as a slave under capitalism right now. Um, yeah, so I think really what you said is very insightful, very impactful, and I agree. Um, when it comes to whatever is the future here in the imperial core, because I am of the belief personally that America, which stands for white supremacy and genocide, cannot be reformed. It needs to be completely and utterly abolished. Um, so whatever future happens here, um, those right wingers, those liberals like the AOCs, the Bernies, the Kamalas, Obama, Joe Biden, those people who they try to propagate this idea that they're your friend, that they can make America also great again, that we can go back. We don't have to be like Donald Trump, but America has always been that way. That's why the likes of Donald Trump are able to do what they're doing. If Donald Trump was such a threat to the status quo, then the Democrats would have never just handed him power. But the reason why they handed him power is because this benefits them. These deportations, these facilities, these legislations they're trying to pass benefits them. And it really benefits them when you're scared, like you were saying. And that's really what they're all trying to do. And don't get me wrong, it is a scary thing. I mean, me myself as a brown man in the States, like, yeah, I was on TikTok seeing every other thing I was coming across was about people being deported, people who look like me. And I'm like, damn, you know what? That's pretty scary. But that doesn't change personally what I've been doing already. Doesn't change what so many communists within the United States are going to be doing anyway, because we have to. We just simply have to. We knew this was coming, and they knew that they're trying to shake us. But you're right. They're absolutely weak, because if they weren't weak, they wouldn't be trying so hard.
Exactly. You can see, for example, these ICE raid units that they started operating basically on day one. And you need weeks and months to organize these campaigns. And you can see that this was all planned in advance, that capitalism is trying to predict these movements, to predict the direction we might go in, and try to use some new avenues of distraction. So right now, instead of just using raw brute force, so like happened in fascist Italy, in fascist Germany, or fascist Japan, they're trying to uh, they're trying to surround you from all sides. They're trying to erect these phantoms. They're trying to use more subtle methods. They're trying to use these methods of manipulation, of emotional torment, the methods of guilt tripping, gaslighting. They're just trying everything to see
Mhm.
what sticks. And as for the revolutionary action itself, what can I also say is be brave, but also be careful. So you should know your battles before you enter them, and you try to use the safer avenues of influence of building a popular base. So you should not rush headfirst into battle and get killed. The thing is that we need as many comrades as we can, because we need to help people. We need to
Yeah.
rescue people. We need to make sure that these
Yeah.
people are alive and well, because these people are often very experienced. They can have a really meaningful difference on this class battlefield. Because one of the ways how capitalism managed to defeat the Soviet Union for some time in 1991 is because they used these campaigns of terror and invasions in order to eliminate the most skillful, the most capable communists. For example, during the Great Patriotic War, we lost millions of communist youth members. The very same people who could have told no to Khrushchev, no to Gorbachev, no to Yeltsin. If you let these people grow up, to let them be even more educated, even more prepared. And that is why you need to be careful. You need to keep as many people as you can out of prison, and those people who are now in capitalist custody, you must fight for their release. You must do everything to make the capitalists give concessions, to offer help to these comrades, simply writing letters, simply writing about their predicament, to let people know what is really going on, to constantly exert this pressure on the capitalist government to release people, or at the very least provide them with some amenities, with some contact, or maybe do something. A very good thing that happened, thanks to this popular pressure. Leonard Peltier was released from prison, and now he is in house arrest. This is much, much better than prison. And these are the things that we must fight for. So save, educate, and preserve as many people as we can for future battles, and yet fight for those who were taken from us, who are in capitalist prisons, who might be experiencing trouble. We must help these people, and any way we can, because that is how we build the popular movement. This is where we get the moving parts to build the party in its true sense of the word. And you must use any means at your disposal to make this fight easier. If you have some legal means, use them. If you can use the capitalist courts to make the fight a little bit easier, you need to use it. But of course, you also need to understand that the capitalists will never let go, and that you must have this movement in place that can fight the capitalist government. So it might be strictly underground, it might be in this gray area, but you also need to have this parallel network of people, of really reliable, good comrades that know each other, that can help each other, and that can rapidly spread the news if need be, that can rapidly organize. I lost the train of thought for a little bit.
It's so good.
Let me
No,
backtrack.
okay.
Yeah, a little bit. So this kind of movement, so you get more dispersed, but you get more consolidated as a result. And the capitalist government loses a clear sight of the target. It does not have a clear target, and it is not able to suppress or destroy the communist movement in one stroke. So that's what we need to accomplish. So this sort of party, in the true sense of the word, that really unites people, and the people should be so trained in the communist agitation, even if it's not communist by name. You don't even really need to call it communist by name. The thing is, once people get educated and organized enough, revolution and communism will be their second nature. You don't have to explain to them; they will just understand what to do.
Right. So before we go on, obviously Collective would never advocate for anything, violent or upheaval or anything, that would disrupt the status quo, nothing like that. However, in this hypothetical, right, revolution needs to be strategic. And sometimes that strategy involves purely legal means, like they did in Cuba up until the very moment that they couldn't anymore. Sometimes it means court battles. Sometimes it does mean sanctioned protests. Sometimes it means unsanctioned protests. And by sanctioned, I mean, what the state recognizes. Sometimes it means strategic sit-ins. Sometimes it means strategic boycotts. Sometimes it also means, again, hypothetically, underground, less than courteous means, right? It all depends on the material conditions of your community, of where you are geographically. That's a huge part of it too. Not everybody is going to be running into the heartlands of the United States in the mountains, and we're fighting a guerrilla war. That may happen in some places in the world, and it may not happen in other places. A good example of that is like what happens in the Philippines, where you have certain sectors of the Philippines that are militarily occupied by communist forces, but then in places like in the cities, it's a much more of like a legal student battle that occurs. All these things happen simultaneously. Revolution is not war in general is not a video game where it's red and blue, lines. It's very sophisticated and complicated. All these different moving parts that make these things occur. What was I going to say? But yeah, no, I think I think all the comrades, in one sense or another, they have their own place within the movement. Some people like what we're doing here. We're talking online, something that goes on mainstream media, because right now the capitalists let us do that. So we're going to keep doing that until we can't do it anymore. And then even if they won't let us do that anymore, we'll find a way, because people always have found a way. And other people are going to infiltrate bourgeois government and try to work within the inside. Other people are going to have much more aggressive parties, or like mainstream mutual aid and things like that. Everybody has a place, I think, as long as they're fighting for the correct path, and the correct path, I would say, is liberation, is communism, is the dismantling of the imperial state. But again, I digress. That's all hypothetical, and I don't actually believe in any of that.
So, like I mentioned, in 1981, the Baltic nationalists restored their capitalist government. And in Latvia and Estonia, they went one step further. Basically, they said that these republics, these capitalist republics that we've just rebuilt, it is the continuation of the original capitalist republics that formed under the German supervision in 1918. And what we're going to do is we're going to give the citizenship only to those people who inhabited this first bourgeois republic and all of their descendants, their children. But if you came from other Soviet republics or outside the USSR, even if you live in Latvia, so you or your children, you will not be given the Latvian or Estonian citizenship. So out of 2.7 million people in Latvia, 800,000 were deprived of their citizenship, of their Soviet citizenship. They became stateless people. So basically, they were deprived of most of their rights, but they technically still count as the Baltic subjects. So in Estonia, which had roughly 1.6 million people in 1990, roughly 300,000 were deprived of their citizenship. They also became stateless. So what these people cannot do, they cannot vote, they cannot get elected, they cannot apply for municipal or government positions of employment. They cannot own or carry weapons or firearms of any sorts. They also cannot become rescue workers. They cannot become firefighters or attorneys. They cannot become licensed attorneys. They cannot practice law. They also cannot buy certain strips of land that are considered to be strategic. So the citizens who are recognized as such, they can buy it, but non-citizens cannot. And non-citizens also faced a lot of restrictions, but overall, thanks to the pressure of human rights organizations and international awareness, some of these restrictions were softened. So before the 2000s, the non-citizens in Latvia and Estonia, they couldn't even apply for citizenship. That's it. They were locked into this apartheid system forever. The only way out of this was to simply renounce your status outright and go for another citizenship altogether in a foreign country, which is difficult, or marriage quotas, which were very, very low on purpose. And in the late 1990s, early 2000s, it was amended. So now you have to pass these tests. So it includes a language test. It includes the reciting of the national capitalist anthem. And it also includes an oath of loyalty. So basically what they did, they took out away your rights. They took out away your freedoms that were guaranteed by the Soviet state. You still have to pay taxes. You still have to obey these laws, but you cannot get any representation whatsoever. And at the same time, if you want to get back the citizenship, at least some kind of rights that you lost, you have to subject yourself to this humiliating procedure of pledging loyalty. And this system was designed, first of all, to secure the national supremacy in all of these capitalist assemblies. So the situation was so dire that in Estonia and Latvia in the 1990s, there was not even a single member of parliament or minister from an ethnic minority. So the ethnic minorities were disproportionately affected. So the Russians, the Ukrainians, the Belarusians, and also people from other Soviet republics, for example, Lithuanians who immigrated to Latvia and Estonia after World War II. They were also deprived of their citizenship. And also, a lot of people from mixed marriages also got affected. So it was really, really confusing because basically they rewarded citizenship also based on loyalty. So if you were a member of the Communist Party or a communist organization like the Communist Youth or some sort of communist governmental organization, and you outright refuse to renounce your loyalty to the Soviet Union, if you remained loyal to the motherland, you were also deprived of citizenship. And loyal communists are barred from gaining citizenship forever. They just cannot do it. That's it. You are in this blacklist and you are under government surveillance and you just cannot apply for citizenship, period. So that's how harsh it is. And until the 2000s, non-citizens also faced a lot of discrimination and repression when it came to employment and education. Regardless of your CV, your accomplishments, or your grades, you were always placed at the bottom of the pile when you were seeking employment and education. For example, even if you got better accomplishments and you've got a better resume, you were still placed to the bottom simply because someone else is a citizen and you're not. They canceled it in the 2000s because of international pressure, but there's still over 80 limitations that are still active for non-citizens in both Latvia and Estonia. And because of that, many people opted to gain Belarusian or Russian citizenship outright, simply because foreign citizens in Latvia and Estonia have more rights than non-citizens, believe it or not. And because of that, the Baltic governments are beginning a new series of crackdowns. They're requesting from these people with residence permits who have Belarusian or Russian citizenship that they need to pass this new language test. So basically, they cancel your residency permit, even though it's legal and you've done nothing wrong, and you still have to pass this language test. And we're talking about people who are now in their 70s and their 80s because more than 30 years have passed already. And a lot of these people have medical problems. They cannot pass these ridiculous language tests, and even the nationalists themselves admit that they too are very likely to fail the test. So a lot of these older people who have the Russian or Belarusian citizenship, they get failed on purpose. Their residency permit gets canceled, and they have to leave the country, or else they get deported. And this instrument not also directly safeguards the national system from any kind of change because people cannot vote. The people who are most opposed to this barbaric system, they cannot vote. But also, it pits one group of people against another group of people, different ethnicities against each other. So the Latvians are pitted against the Slavic people, against people from other Soviet countries, and people with citizenship are pitted against those who don't have citizenship. So they're just dividing people based on these arbitrary borders in order to safeguard their supremacy, their position of power. And that's what we're fighting for, because among our ranks, a lot of people are citizens from birth, but they still see the system as unjust, as inhumane, and this system must be abolished. And we, the communists in the Baltics, we say it firmly. So citizenship to everybody who wants it, no preconditions, and compensations to those people who suffered from it. And those who were responsible for designing this terrible system, they must be punished because they incite ethnic hatred, they enable discrimination, they enforce discrimination, and basically they stand against everything that humanity stands for. Because all of these Baltic nationalists and Baltic Nazis, they openly admitted that they were inspired by the South African and Israeli system of apartheid. And they say it outright. We do not need you to know our language. We need you to know your place. That's one of the fascist members of parliament said. This is his quote verbatim.
Yeah, it's again remarkably similar to the United States and where the United States is headed. So in the United States, I would say, for the most part, there has been an apartheid system, particularly in a sense with how indigenous Americans are treated. In the United States, there are what are called reservations, essentially swaths of land that indigenous tribes and people communities live on in their own sovereignty under the United States, and basically it's a separation of where the United States government recognizes that indigenous people can govern themselves and put them in these places. And I don't mean to be like govern themselves, quote unquote, as if like I'm saying that they can't. It's still under the boot of imperialism. They'll take all these thousands of miles of land that used to belong to these indigenous people and now put them in a place where like it's you could barely grow food, you know. And then of course, you know how the United States just overall being a white supremacist nation, how they treat particularly black people, African Americans within the United States, redlining them, placing them in bad neighborhoods, or what makes a neighborhood bad is in neighborhoods that don't have a lot of resources, underfunded schools, food deserts, push people towards crime, push people towards alcoholism and drug use, like you were mentioning before. Um, and basically, it's called the school to prison pipeline in the United States, particularly with people of color, and particularly with black people within the United States, where somebody who grows up, in a underfunded, underdeveloped neighborhood that is kept under because of capitalist forces. Um, Young people, particularly men who don't feel like they have a future, who end up, into bad situations, who end up committing crime because crime, as we know, is a socioeconomic factor, or is a result of socioeconomic factors. Leads then to people getting in trouble, becoming prisoners, and according to the United States Constitution, slavery is permitted as long as you're a prisoner. So that in itself, the school to prison to slavery pipeline is a very real thing. And now, this new administration wants to again speed run that and make it even more overt by they're discussing now the challenging the 13th, or I'm sorry, the 14th Amendment, which actually I didn't catch her name, but it's one of Trump's new people was just last night talking on TV about how this is like a verbatim quote was, this administration does not believe in the legitimacy of birthright citizenship because it is unconstitutional. Um so basically what they're saying, yeah, is exactly what you're saying, that they want to put a stipulation where you cannot be a citizen simply because you were born on American soil. Now, the contradiction here is, so someone like me who was born here, because my parents had me here, I get citizenship does not mean my parents get citizenship, right? There's a misconception that they call them anchor babies, where Spanish immigrants will have kids because if they have kids, they won't get deported. That's never been true. The kids get citizenship doesn't mean the parents do not automatically get citizenship. But the bigger contradiction here is the same thing on paper applies to white people, right? So, for example, I know somebody whose mom was born on a military base in Greenland. So, because she was born on a military base in Greenland, her, that military base is considered American soil. So they have the birthright citizenship, right? So where is the line going to be drawn? It's going to be drawn on the color of your skin. The new administration just wants to get to a point where they can say that, where they can say brown and black people and also native people are not citizens. Now you have to do something else in order to gain that citizenship. Um, Whether or not the administration will ever be able to actually have that happen, because it usually takes a couple of years for the Constitution to change, like at all. I don't know, but right now in the States, we're in unprecedented times.
Yeah, this kind of separation, they're trying to erect this arbitrary border to create this animosity between people. So, for example, under certain conditions, giving expanded rights or privileges to one group of people in order to antagonize them, to sort of bribe them, because they give this give these rights as some sort of bribe. So you can pit not only different ethnicities against one another, but you can also pit members of the same group against each other. For example, people who were awarded these rights for one reason or another, they can see themselves as more fortunate or more capable, and they can start looking down on those people who are under the oppression, who were stripped of their rights, and they're trying to recreate the same system in the Baltics. They've been creating it for a long time, where they're trying to get a select few good Slavic people, in quotation marks, and the so-called good Slavic people, for example, in the Baltics, will act as a mouthpiece for nationalism, and they will say, "Oh, you just have to, abandon your culture entirely." You see, uh, being Slavic is all about being imperialist or being all about against Baltic independence or some sort of. But if you try to cuddle with the nationalists, if you try to pander to them, then maybe you might be led into this club. But the truth to the matter is that, like I said, the nationalists say, we don't need you to know our language. We need you to know your place. Because these loyalties are very often based on class. Because you have these Baltic fascist emigres who escaped the rightful punishment. They escaped with the Nazi troops and with these Western rat lines to places like Sweden, the United States, South America, Australia, etc., in order to escape punishment from the Soviet government. And what happened in the 1990s, they flocked back because the capitalist government was taking all of this government property and awarding to the members of its own class. So all of these collaborators who came back, they got citizenship right after stepping through that door. They got all of these state enterprises and housing blocks. They could collect rent now. And for example, those people, for example, they could be Estonian, Latvian, Lithuanian. They can be a they they can be a pure-blooded Balt, but they're not going to get the same privileges if they stand against capitalism. Because a lot of people from the Communist Party who were members of the Communist Party, they were arrested and imprisoned in the 1990s, and only through public pressure and international pressure, they were released in the late 1990s. And we also have a very significant Baltic diaspora in Siberia because starting in the 19th century, a lot of people from the Baltics traveled to Siberia because all of the colonization that was going on, that was undertaken by the Russian imperialist government. And a lot of these people got these plots of land. And right now, these places have a vibrant Baltic communities where they teach Estonian, Latvian, Lithuanian. And the very same people, when some of them returned, when the Soviet government was restored in Latvia, then they were denied citizenship simply because they are not member of the same class. They do not represent the same values. They stand against capitalism, and that's why they were also not awarded these rights. And the Siberian Baltic diaspora, it is not recognized as a diaspora by the Baltic government. All of these fascist collaborators who fled to the United States, Canada, and whatnot, sure, you're the diaspora, no problem. But for example, if you're in Siberia, if you feel this loyalty to the Soviet land, then no, you're not a diaspora. So this division exists through the class lines. They strictly separate these class borders, but they're still trying to create these new lines of separation, these new avenues of influence, in order to keep people atomized and divided. So the more divided they are, the more atomized they are, the better for the capitalists, obviously. And that is why we must explain this to the people and say that this system does not exist to help the people. It only exists to subjugate the people, to pit people against one another, to accelerate the death and destruction of our people. It only serves to reinforce the capitalist system that exists as it is. And that is why, regardless of your citizenship status, regardless of your ethnicity, regardless of your workplace, regardless if you're faithful or not, you must see that communism is the only way out of this, and the only way out of this trajectory that will take us to extinction. Because as long as these horrific conditions exist, there can be no prosperity for anyone here.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. That it always comes down to the same conclusion. I know sometimes as communists we sound like broken records, but it's simply just true. We've seen the evidence. We understand dialectically what is happening right now. We know the only solution is communism, and that's just it. And It's funny because there's not a whole heck of a lot left to say. Like that's just simply is. It's just a fact.
So I will probably talk about the current situation, what is going on right now, and what we can do to alleviate it somewhat, and what other people can do, for example, to help us. So the situation has always been difficult post 1991 because even though there were legal organizations present, there is still a ban on explicit communist ideology and imagery. So the comrades in the Baltics have to adopt a lot of different names and monikers just to stay within the legal field, because it is a lot easier to attract new people. It is a lot easier to get noticed by young people. It is a lot easier to grow. But unfortunately, the situation has become a lot more difficult post 2022. Because of the situation in Ukraine. Again, I have to be very careful because the laws here are very repressive, and I have to be careful about how I phrase things. So, in short, the situation in Ukraine was used by the Baltic governments as a pretext to crack down even harder on the communist and labor movements here. For example, in Lithuania, there is an organization that is called the Good Neighborship Organization. So basically, it promotes cultural ties between Lithuania and its neighbors. So obviously, Poland, Latvia, Belarus, and Russia. And it says that you should stop inciting conflict. You should initiate dialogue with Russia and Belarus because they're our neighbors. And in order to be strong and prosperous, we need to remain friendly with our neighbors, because otherwise, you're just going to cause another conflict. And members of these organizations are severely repressed. For example, its leader, Evika Shrenchinen, she's awaiting imprisonment. She's being tried right now. And we publish information too about these horrific actions that the Lithuanian government undertakes. And a similar situation is going on in Latvia. There was the biggest new communist organization ever since the Communist Party. The new organization is called the Workers' Front of Latvia, and its activities were suspended in 2023, and in 2024 it was banned because its members rallied against the demolition of Soviet World War II memorials. So the Baltic governments initiated a campaign of against the Slavic people, against the Russian speakers. So the Russian and other Slavic languages are being aggressively pushed out of everywhere, out of news, out of educational institutions, everywhere. And also, they've undertaken a massive campaign of completely erasing and destroying the memory of the Great Patriotic War. So they're demolishing all of these monuments that commemorate the victory over fascism, over Nazism. And they're also beginning to desecrate graves. So they're demolishing the graves of the Soviet fighters and partisans. And basically, anyone who questions it gets immediately arrested and tried with glorification of war crimes. I wish I was kidding, but unfortunately, it is just like that. So you can glorify fascism all you want because it aligns with capitalism. You can call the Latvian or the Estonian SS the independence fighters, and this this phrasing is also being thrown around a lot. You can call the Nazi collaborators and the Holocaust perpetrators the Baltic patriots. Now they're also stating it openly. You can open new monuments and pilgrimages to these Nazi collaborators and these criminals. But if you dare to say that the Red Army liberated the Baltics, you will get tried. If you say that the Red Army liberated Auschwitz, you will get in trouble. If you say that it was the Red Army that inflicted a decisive defeat on Nazi Germany, you will get in trouble. If you say that the so-called Forest Brothers were actually Nazi collaborators that mass murdered farmers, workers, and children, then you will get in trouble. So that is the situation right now. We have to work around this wartime censorship all we can, and we have to work under assumed names and pseudonyms. Uh, we have to work on a need to know basis. We have to carefully vet everyone we meet. We have to work very slowly, but again, we're getting progress. We're getting more noticed by people. We're getting good messages from young working people who want to join our cause, who want to help us with translating articles, with spreading our articles. And on the internet, we're getting some notoriety and some interest from other people, even from outside the Baltics. We have these channels that are called Soviet Baltics or the Baltic SSRs. We have channels active on Facebook, on Twitter, on Reddit, and also on Telegram, the Soviet Baltics. And also, we're experimenting with the new Chinese platform, RedNote, to raise awareness of the things that are happening in the Baltics, to share more news about the Baltic revolutionary history. So again, any kind of support is very appreciated. So I will share these links. I will send them to you, and I will also send some banking details if you can help us. So, for example, any kind of donation that you can give to us and to our Russian comrades, if you're able to, they're greatly appreciated, because not only we're publishing things about history and current politics, we're also working on our podcasts and lectures with the School of Scientific Communism from Russia. Right now, a lot of our videos are not translated, but we're working on this to get subtitled videos and publish them, because this is very important, because we read all of these modern works of prominent thinkers like Marx, Engels, Stalin,
Yeah.
Lenin,
Yeah.
Mao, and some more modern works like,
Yeah.
for example, the Korean comrades, Fidel Castro, etc. So again, any
Mhm.
help, any exposure, we would be very grateful.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, that's why one of the reasons why I wanted you to be here, just to have whatever you have to say, to be pushed, by us, even if it isn't, currently the biggest platform, but we're getting there. Um, but the same thing, if this, helps you, show it to your comrades, 100%. Let them know about Collective. Um, we have people on Rednote as well, and these other apps, 100%. Yeah. Yeah, send me the links that you can send me for sure. Um, I don't know. I think overall it's been a pretty great conversation. I got a lot of insight from you. Again, I admire your optimism that you have despite the situation. And I think that needs to be shown more to the people on this side of the planet, so to say. I was gonna ask if there was anything you wanted to link or plug or anything, but you already kind of said it. So I think you kind of put a nice little bow on top of it, unless there's anything else you want to touch on.
Yeah, I will send all of these details to you in text. And also, since we're started speaking about the modern policy of the imperialist governments, what they're up to, what they're doing, another important aspect that I would like to add is that, for example, Eastern Europe in general, excluding places like Belarus and Russia, because that's a completely different topic. I'm strictly talking about those countries that were dragged into the imperialist bloc of NATO EU. So Baltics, Finland, Poland, some Balkan states like Romania and Bulgaria. So they're not only used as a meat shield by imperialism. This is quite obvious, but they're also used as some sort of testing grounds for the policies that might be used later by imperialism if it feels threatened. For example, all of the horrific things that you told about the immigration thugs, about the crackdowns, about the executive orders that, for example, prohibit any criticism of Israel. They similar things were happening here, and they sort of did a test drive of similar policies here, like for example with the apartheid system that they're trying to to expand elsewhere, to the migrant crisis that they themselves manufacture. Now they're using to maintain their stranglehold. And another thing is the anti-communist repression and the rampant historical revisionism and Holocaust denialism. I already mentioned that those Eastern European states are now demolishing anything that could be linked to the heroic victories of the Red Army, to the heroic exploits of the communist movement, of the working class movement. And basically, what they're doing right now is they're trying to whitewash fascism and Nazi Germany in particular by a system that is called the double genocide theory. So what they're doing is that they're trying first to equate fascism to communism using non sequiturs and false equivalents. So they're using a whole bunch of fallacies to get there. They proclaim themselves to be these innocent victims of communism that absolutely did no wrong, and all of the Jews were dead when they got there. So what they're doing is just trying to obfuscate as much context and important details as they can, and they're trying to portray the Soviet Union and all of the socialist states in a extremely negative light. And they're doing that in order to make fascism more appealing, to make fascism seem less bad than it really is. So what they're doing is just horrible. And this tactic has been widely recognized by both Holocaust scholars and World War II scholars as a Holocaust revisionism and Holocaust denialism. Because what they're doing essentially is just trying to inflate these non-existent crimes of communism to the point that it becomes so ridiculous that it overshadows fascism completely. And they're just trying to rebrand fascism and give fascism more breathing room, and trying to make fascism under a different logo more appealing. They're just calling fascism freedom and democracy and the international rule of law. That's what it really means. They're just trying to exploit these good sounding words, these good words that have good meaning. They're trying to appropriate them, and they're trying to use them as the sort of bludgeon against the liberation movements, against the communist movements, against the labor movements, against the strikes, and again, against the workers who want to make things better. And we've basically come full circle. And because of this rampant historical revisionist policy that the United States and Western Europe used since the early 1950s in order to recruit these fascist collaborators as anti-communist agents, we're already having things such as the Canadian Parliament applauding a literal Nazi, a literal member of the SS, or, for example, a lot of US officials and prominent characters giving a Nazi salute, like you've seen with Musk and some other freaks. It did not come out of nowhere. It's been decades in the making, and right now they're just openly using it as an anti-communist tool. So they're again using fascism. The fascism is again, it is more spread out. It is less focused on blunt force, but it's more focused on psychological and mental warfare. And again, it uses a whole slew of deceptions and trickery to hide its true nature and to hide its true origins. It is very similar to Trotskyism that tries to cling onto the good name of communism, but it just uses all of these underhanded tactics to sabotage the communist movement from within and give all of these victories to imperialism. So it was said by Comrade Stalin, you should be careful. If you turn too far left, you will end up on the right. So here they're doing a very similar thing. They're trying to rebrand imperialism as this sort of, as freedom, democracy, rule of international law, as freedom, as I don't know, as the fight for the future of the Western world or something like that. They're just trying to come up with these really family-friendly phraseology to hide their true nature. And the thing is that we must shine the light continuously. We must expose their tactics. We must tell everybody what they're really up to. And we must tell people bluntly, what they're doing is fascism. What they're doing is Holocaust denialism. What they're doing is justifying Nazi war crimes. What they're trying is just to revive imperialism. What they're trying to do is just to subjugate other countries. What they're trying to do is to perpetuate their rule. So it is very, very, very important to fight both for the culture and for the language, because imperialism is using any avenue it can. Because we must keep fighting for words, because again, they're trying to appropriate words, they're trying to appropriate movements, they're trying to appropriate our history, they're trying to bastardize it, they're trying to erase it, and we must fight again against that as well. Because again, it's all part of our reality. It's all part of the same universe. And again, all of these things are connected to each other. Again, if they're trying to influence your mentality, if they're trying to influence your mind, they're trying to do something physically. They're trying to rob you. They're trying to send you to another war. They're trying to destroy and subjugate and enslave another independent country. And you must see through that. You must see through their attempts. You must immediately discard all of their rhetoric. You must immediately see behind it. Do not yourself get distracted. Do not let them scare you. And you must always see their true motive. As the Latin saying goes, qui prodest, see those who benefit. You must always see that. So you need to see through all these Trump antics, all right? So Trump is not an idiot, okay? So he's not as strong an imperialist as, say, Richard Nixon, but you must not get distracted by Trump's antics. You must see beyond them. You must see what's really behind them, what they're trying to distract you from. So, for example, all of these ambitions towards Greenland and Panama Canal, you must see behind the antics. What they're doing with these ICE gangs, what they're trying to do with these deportations, what they're trying to do with these anti-labor laws, what they're trying to do with this anti-communist Red Scare hysteria against China and other socialist countries. You must always see behind that. You must always see the class nature of their statements and what they're trying to achieve. So, like our good comrade Julius Fuchik said, be vigilant. People, just be vigilant.
Absolutely. Yeah. Very wonderfully said, very well spoken. Um you're absolutely right, and again, just emphasizing re-emphasizing what you're saying, when I was saying earlier and you were saying earlier, like Trump is just trying to scare people. The administration, the capitalists are just trying to scare people because they're weak, because they're falling apart, and they know it. That's why they call for these desperate imperial ambitions. Talk about Greenland, Panama, Mexico, Canada. It's because they know that their time is coming. They know that it's unsustainable, but they, in a way, are desperate and hopeful that if they can implement enough fear, that people won't resist. But humans have always resisted, no matter what. It's in our nature to resist. We have a video essay about that from Comrade Ash. Shout out Comrade Ash, um, about how communism is essentially immediately compatible with human nature. Human nature being subjective in some cases, which I won't spoil too much because that's what's in the video. But yeah, absolutely, Escalante. Absolutely, I think you put it better than I could have.
And one last thing, never believe imperialism, never believe anything they say. You must very, very carefully see what they're trying to achieve with this deception, because you need to always assume that they're trying to trick you, that they're trying to double cross you, that they're trying to pull a scummy move. So you must always keep that in mind. They're trying to distract you. They're trying to distract you with all this juggling, so you wouldn't see a knife in their pocket. So never, never believe imperialism. So Comrade Chess said, never believe imperialism even this much, but we should clarify it. Never believe imperialism, period. Just never, ever believe them.
Yeah, exactly. They're highly motivated to get you to believe a particular narrative. So when they talk about they're going after the cartels, or they gotta take Panama because China's going in there, or because Greenland is rightfully America, or whatever the hell they want to, say. Like, again, who's saying it and why are they saying it? What is their motivation? Their motivation, the capitalist motivation, is to what? To maintain order, to maintain the status quo. So there's absolutely no reason that we as a proletariat should ever just believe what they have to say. That just doesn't, there's just nothing there.
And when people understand this, that capitalism always lies, always, 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 whenever it does, it lies, whenever it tries to do it lies, cheats, and steals, as Pompeo put succinctly, because he admitted who they really are. When people understand that, the capitalism will start losing rapidly, because right now most of their power is concentrated in this psychological baggage that they strap to us. This feeling of hopelessness. This sort of obedience, leftover obedience to the capitalist system, or simply fear that you're not certain what's going to happen tomorrow, or that you're afraid to get into trouble if you try to fight against capitalism. Oh, why should I do so? Why should I do anything? Maybe someone else would do this for me. Or, for example, uh, oh, well, for example, if people are scared enough, oh, why are you trying to do this? Are you trying to get everyone in trouble? Oh, well, what will you accomplish? Etc., etc. So never give in to imperialist blackmail, to imperialist intimidation, and like I mentioned previously, just walk your own path. We need to overcome this critical mass, and just like a waterfall, it will overwhelm and destroy imperialism. So we just need to take these steps. We just need to walk this road, even if it might be slow for some time. But we can already see that it's ramping up. That it's a lot faster, and a lot more. It's a lot more vicious than it was 20 years ago, when everybody believed that liberalism would stay forever. Or, for example, a lot of people believed these idiotic writings of Fukuyama, the end of history. But even Fukuyama himself admits that that's it. Their time is over, and right now they're just trying to, buy every second. Like in Shakespeare plays, just 1 second, just 1 second. So they're just so the villains are just trying to delay their demise by whatever means necessary, and they will absolutely try to unleash a lot of destruction. So that is why we must help as many people as we can get. We must convince, and we must work with all these people, because again, communists. It's not just a badge. It's not some sort of brand name. It's who you are. It means being fully human. It's just realizing your true human potential, and doing this thing. So that's what we need to do.
Absolutely. Asking thanks so much for coming on the podcast and giving us your wisdom all the way from the Baltics.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I again will send all of these details, and if our dear viewers have any more questions, they can just search us up, or contact me directly, because I think you can already find us through these search engines. So through Facebook, Twitter, or Reddit, or Telegram, or whichever platform you prefer, you can just contact us directly, and ask questions if you have any. Or, for example, if you'd
Absolutely.
like to help us, or if you'd like to volunteer, any help. So we are a human brotherhood, and we must all help each other. Again, thank you
Absolutely.
very much
Absolutely.
for interviewing me, and have a very nice weekend.